Hey everyone, Smart's coming back. Yes, for the first time in about 14, 15 years, the Smart brand is coming back to Ireland. The first cars are going on sale in January. And this, the hashtag 3, yes, it really is called that. And we don't know why they're taking the names from TikTok either, but there we are. The hashtag 3 will be one of the two new Smarts arriving in the new year. The other one being the smaller, slightly chunkier, slightly taller hashtag 1. The 3 is designed to be Smart's kind of sleek, cool, but still roomy crossover. Yeah, it does look quite nice, particularly in this lovely, very shiny red paint. And this is the sportiest version. This is the Brabus version. We'll talk more about that in a minute. It is quite long and quite low. It's still trying to be an SUV. You've got these big chunky plastic wheel arches and stuff, and there is a bit of ride height there. But nonetheless, it's kind of not too tall, not too big. It is quite nice. The styling is fine. It's all clean and very sleek, but I can't help but feeling that it's a bit kind of taking too much from other cars. It's a bit BYD at the front. It's a bit Cooper at the back. That roofline is a bit Hyundai Ioniq 6. It's not making a particularly strong statement about being a Smart. And I know Smart has to move on from being the company that makes the titchy little 4.2 two-seater, but nonetheless, I don't know, are you going to look at this and think that it's a Smart, or are you just going to look at it and think it's another generic electric crossover? I fear it might be the latter, even though you do get nice big Smart badging down there, and this Brabus version has a sort of fake air intake, the reasons for which escape me, to be honest. This one's on 20-inch alloys. You get 19s as standard. It's based on the same platform as the Volvo EX30, and that's because Smart is now a joint venture between Mercedes, which has always owned it for 25 years. It is actually Smart's 25th birthday next year, incidentally, and Chinese car company Geely, which also owns Volvo, Polestar, Lotus, and a whole bunch of others. So under here, you get the same battery, same rear-wheel drive electric motor as you get in the Volvo EX30. And also, in the case of this Brabus version, you get the same four-wheel drive layout. So there's an extra motor in the front and more than 420 horsepower. This thing will do 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 3.7 seconds. It will annihilate some Porsches. Quite what the point of that is a bit beyond me, to be honest, because it is, you know, supposed to be a family-friendly crossover. But there you go, it can do it. The standard rear-wheel drive version comes with 272 horsepower and can still do 0 to 100 Ks in 5.8 seconds, which to me seems plenty brisk enough. I don't know about you, but the one thing that Smart says it is doing to make it a Smart and not just something else is giving it loads of interior space. So let's go and take a look at the inside and see what that's like. So here in the front of the hashtag 3, Smart's come up with a fairly distinctive look, it has to be said. You get a big 12.8-inch screen here in the centre. The higher spec versions, everything other than the very basic Pro version, gets a very nice little extra digital driver's display here behind the wheel, which I have to say I really, really like. It's so much better than looking over here and trying to see your speed and everything else that you need to know on the big screen. It's much less distracting to have this here. Oddly, this whole center console, these three vents here, all the way down here to the armrest, looks to me like it's been pinched from the old Mercedes-Benz C-Class, which I guess is a bit of a cost saving. But actually underneath, there's a big, big open storage area. You can get a handbag or a backpack in there. There's more storage in here. There's more under here, including a mobile phone charger, 2 USB points. There's more storage in there. So it is quite practical. There are big door bins, but the problem is they're not lined, they're just bare plastic. So anything you put in there is going to rattle around the place constantly when you're driving. It's going to be really, really annoying. This being a high-spec Brabus version also gets a heads-up display, incidentally. The glass roof is actually standard even on the very basic Pro version, and so are the heated seats, although here in the Brabus they're also heated and ventilated here in the front. All of the hashtag 3s get these big chunky bucket seats. Obviously these ones come with the Brabus logo stitched into the headrest. Brabus, of course, was always better known as a tuning company that took on Mercedes cars and shoved massively powerful engines into them. It's kind of a rival for AMG in the old days, but these days it's, while it's still an independent company, it does officially tune Brabus models as well as unofficially tuning Mercedes models as well. Now, we do need to talk about the touchscreen because it's incredibly irritating. It's one of the worst I've come across in a long time. The menu layout and the way you find things on the screen is quite haphazard. It's not as bad as some, but it's certainly not great. But what's worse is that there are bing bongs and warnings and alerts for everything. And it just does it constantly, whether it's the lane you're in, whether it's the speed you're doing, whether it's a car in front of you or something else. It is constantly telling you things. And to be honest, it ends up being more of a distraction than anything else. You're just constantly looking down at the screen, or the one here trying to go, why is it bing bonging at me now? You can turn some of them off, but it's exceedingly difficult to. Now, I know you shouldn't really be turning off safety warnings and such like. In an ideal world, you wouldn't. But the problem with this one is that it's also wildly inaccurate. Several times today, the speed limiter warning has been completely inaccurate. It's told me I've been able to do 90 kilometers an hour when I've actually been in a 60 kilometer an hour zone. It's told me at one point when I was driving through a very small village with very narrow streets that I was allowed to do 80 kilometers an hour. So I don't mind the systems reminding you to drive carefully, but they should be accurate and they should be, proper. They should actually do their job properly, and this one really doesn't. So I think, perhaps a good option would be a large lump hammer, so you could just knock the screen out when it gets a bit too frustrating. But as I said earlier, Smart are making big promises about how much space is available in the hashtag 3. So let's take a look in the back and see if that's true or not. And the fact is that yes, there is plenty of room here in the back of the hashtag 3. I've got that seat set quite a long way back, and yet loads and loads of legroom, plenty of headroom, even though there's the big glass roof there. There's a flat floor, so there's room for your feet here. The middle seat is pretty narrow, but it doesn't jerk you up as high as some others, so it's tolerable, although you probably wouldn't want to be there for all that long. There's a armrest here with 2 cup holders, more slightly clattery loud door bins, air vents, USB slots, and a little storage space there, and seat back pockets there. So yeah, Smart has definitely made good on its promise of lots of interior space, and it's way better than you get in the EX30, for example, which obviously, as I said, uses the same platform. The Smart isn't a longer car overall, in fairness, but there is a price to pay, and that's in boot space, which is only 370 litres, which is a bit stingy, really. Now, it does have an adjustable boot floor, so you've got space underneath to stash your charging cables if you need to. There is a frunk, but it's effectively useless. It's only 15 litres. It's really only useful for storing very small, valuable items that you want to keep well and truly out of sight. But what's the Smart like to drive? What's the hashtag 3 like to drive? And particularly, what's this Brabus, which is, let's not forget, the sporty version, like to drive? Is it as good as that 420 odd horsepower figure makes it seem? This being the high performance Brabus version, with all of that power, that ability to do 0 to 100 Ks in 3.7 seconds, you'd think this would be the incredibly exciting sporty version. But while it's a little bit more dynamic in terms of its steering and handling and braking, the gap isn't all that big, to be honest with you. It doesn't feel like a highly tuned performance car, even though, as I said, it's got enough straight line performance to take apart a few supercars. When we get to a straight stretch here, I'll show you what I mean. Look how fast the background goes past. It is very quick. The problem is, it does rob the range as well. The standard car with the 66 kilowatt hour battery, that's got a range of 455 kilometers. This is down closer to 400, and I suspect in day-to-day use, judging by the 26.2 kilowatt hour per 100 kilometer average I've been getting so far today in this car, it's going to be even less than that. Now, there is a basic version called the hashtag 3 Pro, and that comes with a cheaper lithium iron phosphate battery, LFP, same one that's used in the Volvo EX30, and that gets you about 330 kilometers on a full charge. It also comes with a cheaper, more basic 7.4 kilowatt hour AC charging system, and that makes the whole car cheaper. That combination of cheaper battery, cheaper charging system. In fact, Smart says it costs around €5,000 less to make that car than to make the 66 kilowatt hour version with the lithium ion battery. Obviously, the difference in range is quite significant. 455 plays 330. And the charging is different as well. When you get up to the premium spec of the hashtag 3 with the 66 kilowatt hour battery, that comes with 22 kilowatt AC charging, just like a Renault, just like a Nissan, and that makes it much quicker to charge from curbside ESB chargers. So it turns them almost into a fast charger. You can go from 10% to 80% power in 3 hours on one of those chargers if you're getting all 22 kilowatts at once. Um, in terms of fast charging, the basic battery, the LFP battery in the Pro, that charges at up to 130 kilowatts on DC power. The bigger battery, the 66 kilowatt hour, that charges at up to 150 kilowatts on DC power. Both will go from 10 to 80% charge in half an hour if you can find a charger that's fast enough. The standard spec in the Hashtag 3 is actually very good. You get that big glass roof as standard, you get heated seats as standard, you get the big screen as standard. The basic Pro version, though, doesn't come with the extra driver's display. The instruments move on to the big screen. Although there is an optional heads-up display, I do think that's a bit of a mistake. It's much, much better to have a proper screen here in front of you where you can just glance your eyes down and see what your speed and such like is. That 66 kilowatt hour version does seem to have the range that it claims as well. It was showing on 100% charge this morning, it was showing 455 kilometers, and at about 80% charge, including some driving up in these rather beautiful mountains in Mallorca, it was showing 380 kilometers available. So it's pretty solid, it seems to be anyway, in terms of range, although of course we're in Mallorca and the temperatures are nice and clement, if not exactly hot. There is a heat pump heating system, incidentally, in the premium version and in this Brabus, which does help, obviously, because it means you can run your air conditioning and your cabin heating much more economically when it's too hot or too cold outside. I do wonder quite how well it will do for range, any version of it, when it gets shown a motorway on a cold, wet Irish day. But nonetheless, mechanically speaking, it's pretty decent. It's just that to drive, it's just not very much fun. Even this Brabus version, the steering's quite numb. The handling is fine. I mean, it goes around these very twisty switchback corners quite nicely, but it's not entertaining. It's not, it's not pulling you in as a driver. I know most people don't, well, or at least they think they don't crave that, but actually it is a nice thing to have. And actually that Volvo EX30 does feel somewhat sweeter to drive in similar circumstances. So this is grand, but you can feel the weight, and there's not much loose change between this and 2 tons, incidentally. You can really feel the weight affecting the car in corners. It just, although it initially grips and turns in well, it just wants to push wide once you get to the apex. It's not brilliant. It's fine, it's competent, it's sure-footed, it's stable. It cruises very nicely on the motorway, it's very refined. But some of the build quality in here in the cabin is not great. We've noticed over bumpy roads, quite a few annoying squeaks and rattles. These are pre-production cars, so one hopes that will be fixed for the full production cars that are just starting to roll off the factory in Shanghai now. So yeah, Smart is back. But I don't think it's doing enough yet to separate itself out from the horde. And there is a genuine horde of similarly sized, similarly specified electric crossovers all arriving or have already arrived on the Irish market. You used to buy Smart because it was something very special and very particular. And okay, it has to be said that 4.2 did not sell very well in Ireland. It barely sold at all because it was considered to be far too expensive for what it was. As Smart points out, it was as expensive to engineer as a Mercedes E-Class, and yet had to be sold for around 12,000, 13,000 euro at the time. So, quelle surprise. But this, it's certainly a big step into the mainstream, as is the little Hashtag 1. But I'm not sure it's doing enough to make itself stand out. It's just a bit too middle of the road, a bit too safe, a bit too predictable, a bit too dull, if I'm honest. It's fine. It's totally competent, totally good, totally smooth electric transport with good range and what we hope, we haven't got them confirmed yet, what we hope will be competitive pricing. But it just doesn't shout smart. It just doesn't do anything that says, hey, this is something different, this is something you should pay attention to, this is a better, more interesting way of doing things than what everybody else is at. And I think that's something that Smart really should be doing. Maybe if this car is a success, if the Hashtag 1 is a success, maybe that gives Smart the solid financial base to actually do something more interesting in the future. I certainly hope so, because this isn't it.